This is lesson 13 of A Witch's Primer Revisited, and we started practicing some basic spellcasting last lesson, and now we're going to start to refine our spellcasting practice. Today, focus on improving the timing of your spells, and you will find support material for all of our lessons on your lesson page. Once you register for the course, you get an email with a link to your lesson page. And if you haven't registered for the course, it is free of charge. There's no charge at all. You just register for the course, and the only thing that it costs you is that I get to send you emails. And the only emails you'll receive from me tell you when something's happening, like a premiere or something like that, or if I have a new booklet, and then some inspirational emails to help get you through your day. And if you don't like any of that, you can just unsubscribe. You can register for this course for free at arielgatoga.com/AWP, arielgatoga.com/AWP, and those links are always in the video descriptions of the videos for these courses. The first thing you want to understand is that need always overrides timing. If something is urgent, don't worry about the moon phase or the day of the week or any of that. Just go ahead with your spell. Timing wasn't a concern for us when we first started spellcasting last week. I wanted you to get used to the process of it. First of all, let's look at the moon. The moon rises in the east and sets in the west, just like the sun and the planets. When the moon and sun rise at the same time, that's what astrologers call a conjunction. At that conjunction, the moon is not visible to us. In the craft, we call that phase the dark moon. In the calendar, that phase is called the new moon. It's confusing, especially for new students, because they think, oh, I'm going to do something on the new moon. They go look at the calendar and they say, oh, there's the new moon. But that's not the new moon from a magician's point of view, at least not the way I practice. That is called the dark moon. And that's not a good day for magic, especially not a good day for new moon magic. The actual new moon for witches is when the first visible crescent appears, right at or after sunset. And that's usually the day after what the calendar calls the new moon, or what we call the dark moon. So when you look up in the calendar and it says new moon on Wednesday, know that the real new moon is probably on Thursday. Sometimes the new moon might even be as late as Friday, but rarely. Just as a general rule, wait till the day after what the calendar calls the new moon and you'll be fine. But if you want to be sure and there isn't too much cloud cover, check and see if you can see a crescent moon setting as the sun is setting. That's the new moon. Now, the old tradition was that you wouldn't do magic the day before the dark moon, the day of the dark moon, or the day after the dark moon. In other words, if the calendar called it a new moon on Wednesday, that would mean that you wouldn't work magic Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and that you'd start your magic on Friday. The moon rises approximately 58 minutes later each night than the night before. And so each night you're going to notice that the moon changes in size a little bit and what time she rises. So that time between that dark moon and the full moon, you'll see that moon coming up a little bit later every night, but also getting a little bit bigger every night. That 2 weeks between the dark moon and the full moon is called the waxing moon. And then once the moon is full, that's when the sun and the moon are completely opposite each other. And the reason it's full is because the sun is completely shining its light directly on the surface of the moon, and that reflection is coming back to Earth, and we can see all of that surface of the moon from the Earth. We call that the full moon. But remember that the moon continues to rise about 58 minutes later every night. And after the full moon, it appears like the moon is getting smaller each night. So that entire 2 weeks between the full moon and the following dark moon, as the moon gets smaller and smaller each night, is called the waning moon. That last couple of days before the dark moon, when there's a tiny, itty-bitty crescent of moon in the waning phase, that used to be called the old moon. And you don't hear that phrase too much anymore. That old moon is a crescent moon that is right before the dark moon, whereas the new moon is the crescent right after the dark moon. You can tell whether the crescent is an old moon or a new moon based on which way the horns of that crescent are facing. When the horns face to the right, it means it's a waning moon. And when the horns face to the left, it's a waxing moon. You could also tell based on what time of day it's rising or setting. But as a general rule, if you see a crescent moon in the sky and you think, is it waxing or waning? Well, which way are the horns facing? If they're facing to the left, you know it's waxing. If they're facing to the right, you know it's waning. To choose the perfect time for casting your spell, you want to consider, is it a spell of attraction? Is it a spell of increase? Is it a spell of elimination or banishing, we sometimes call it, or decrease? Do I want to get rid of something? Do I want to grow something? Do I want to attract something? Spells regarding growth or attraction, or what we sometimes call positive magic, are done during the waxing moon. The most powerful time of the waxing phase of all is the new moon, that first crescent. So that entire first week of the waxing moon is the most potent of the waxing phase, magically speaking. The full moon is really the beginning of the waning phase. And so the full moon, you can do pretty much any kind of magic you want. It doesn't have to be waxing or waning magic, but for the most part, the full moon, you're going to have the most bang for your buck if you're going to do a waning spell, to do it on the full moon or as close to the full moon into the waning phase as possible. That first week after the full moon is your most powerful waning phase. It's not that the second week of the waxing phase or the second week of the waning phase are weak. It's just they're not quite as powerful and not quite as potent. So if you're going to be scheduling spells, schedule your spells either in the first week of the waxing phase or the first week of the waning phase, depending on the type of magic you're doing. Baneful magic like banishing, getting rid of things, you want to do on the waning moon. Positive magic like growing things or creating new things or attracting things, you want to perform those spells during the waxing moon. You don't have to rest during any part of the full moon. You can work right through the full moon phase. The only rest that we recommend is on the dark moon. And that's, again, what in a calendar or online is called the new moon. Now, you don't have to rest on a dark moon. Especially online, people specialize in dark moon magic and they love dark moon magic. And you can do that if you want to. It's just not how I was raised. It's not the tradition of the craft that I follow. We always were taught that those were times of rest where you don't work magic. It was a kind of a respect thing. The other time that we were taught never to work magic was when there was either a lunar or solar eclipse. And I avoid the day before the eclipse and the day of the eclipse, and sometimes even the day after the eclipse. Nothing bad will happen. It's not that you're going to accidentally call forth some sort of energy that's just horrible. It was always taught that the results weren't as easy to control, that you didn't get what you wanted, and that it was sort of a built-in rest period. Sort of like how in some religions, they just don't work on the Sabbath. That's just how they are, or whatever. We just don't work on the dark moon or the eclipses. But again, it's not a rule. I don't want anybody feeling like there's dogma here. You do what you want. If you really want to do it, or if you need to work magic on a dark moon. Let's say something is really important and you do follow that. If it's something really that can't wait, although that's rare for me, there's usually not a spell that's that urgent that I can't wait for a day. But if it is that, I'll do it. It's no big deal. It'll be fine. It's just not optimal. Okay, so that's your first thing that you want to think about is what phase the moon's in. And if that's all you do, that's going to upgrade things right there, just doing your spell on the right phase of the moon. The next thing you'll want to think about is the day of the week. Now, the day of the week is starting to pull into your spell work some planetary correspondences. So I'm just going to give you some quick correspondences. So if you don't know anything about planets or the days of the week, this will help you. Mondays are sacred to the moon, and the moon focuses on home, peace, children, psychic development, pregnancy, protection, emotions, growth, healing, nourishment, and also embodies feminine energy. And the colors associated with the moon are white, silver, black, and blue. Usually misty blue, not royal blue. Tuesday is governed by Mars, and Mars is about courage, energy, willpower, drive, ambition, conflict, sexual energy, revenge, quick results, overcoming adversaries, both inner and external. And Mars's colors are usually red, crimson, and sometimes orange. Wednesday is associated with Mercury, and Mercury relates to business, intellect, divination, influence, communication, mental energy, education, short-term travel, especially commuting and cars. It also involves uncovering theft and finding lost items. The colors associated with Mercury and Wednesday are yellow, violet, and silver, because that's a representation of quicksilver. It's really not so much violet as lavender. Thursday is Jupiter's day, focusing on expansion, honor, wealth, status, legal matters, and is particularly significant for gambling and luck, as well as making investments and business growth. Jupiter's all about expansion and growth. And mercy, its colors are royal blue, purple, and sometimes gold. Friday is dedicated to Venus, and Venus encompasses beauty, love, partnership, romance, friendship, marriage, creativity, arts, attraction, harmony, joy. And the colors frequently associated with Venus are coral, pink, turquoise, and turquoise-type greens. Saturday is sacred to Saturn, and it deals with the occult, business foundations, real estate, karma, lessons, secrets, reversing situations, bindings, separations, cautions, discipline, debts, endurance, natural law, whereas Jupiter would be human law. The colors are black, brown, gray, and also forest green. Sunday is dedicated to the sun, which is associated with solar activities, including faith, money, fame, friendships, authority, protection, generosity, ambitions, health, and divine intervention. The colors for Sunday are gold, orange, and white. I think those are in one of the handouts on your lesson page. If not, I'll make sure and put one up there. When casting a spell, it's important to consider the day of the week or the planet that you're aligning with. For example, a money spell could align with Jupiter for growth, or for the sun for a new financial opportunity. For a house blessing, you might choose Monday, whereas a spell for quick energy, you might choose Tuesday. For a spell regarding your grades at school, you might want to cast on Wednesday. Each planet also has its own fragrance, or its own fragrance family. You could use essential oils. You could use just flowers. You can also buy commercial perfumes. For the sun, you might opt for sandalwood-based fragrances. For the moon, choose scents that are aquatic or fruity notes or jasmine oriented. For Mars, you might go for something real spicy. And Mercury, you might go for a lavender-based scent. Whereas Jupiter, you might go with a scent with a woody aroma, a cedar-based scent, or anything that smells very expansive and wealthy and rich. For Venus, you might go for floral scents or rose scents, or also musk-based scents are really great. For Saturn, you might go for a leather scent or a scent with a civet or an animalic note. So you can play around with those things. And like I said, I believe there's a handout in the lesson page that has all of these correspondences. And if not, I'll make sure that one is put up. So you can work with the perfumes, you can work with the colors, and you can work with the days of the week when you're starting to work with your spellcasting. Incorporate, first and foremost, the moon phase when you're timing your spells. We'll get more into some of the nuts and bolts of how to work with the perfumes and the colors in further lessons. But just now, as you're doing some of the basic spells like we did last week, you can keep going with that this week and add the moon phase, the day of the week, and maybe consider some of the colors that I mentioned for each planet, and if possible, even some of the fragrances. You can also use planetary hours to enhance your spells. The basic planetary hours included in your handouts are based on an old Chaldean system where each hour of the day is associated with a different planet, and it changes each day. So you can use the method that is in that handout. It's very simple. But if you're working with my course on angel magic, you'll notice that those hours are different and they're even easier to use. But those are based on 8 planets, not 7. So if you happen to be using the planetary hours for the angel magic course, there's no reason you have to change and work with a different planetary hour system for your other magic, unless for some reason you want to. In fact, I find it more powerful if you find a system that you like and just stick with it. So if you like the planetary hour system that is set out in that angel magic course, I recommend you just use that. Now, if you're working with 7 planets and not with 8, if you're not using Uranus in your work like we do sometimes in the angel magic, then you just skip the Uranus hours in that course. The planetary hours are not that important, except for if you want to work on a day that's not associated with the planet. For instance, if you were working on a Friday, but you wanted to do something associated with the moon, what you could do is work on Friday during a moon hour. But if you're working on the day of the planet, you don't have to worry about which hour. Just any time is fine. The only time that the hour really is something that I use is if I'm working on a day not sacred to that planet, but I want to work with that planet. Then I will work in that planetary hour. Now, some people want to make sure that they are very pure with their planetary vibrations, in which case you would work on the day and in the hour of the planet in question. But in my practice, I'm not that strict. I just follow the day of the week. I work with the phase of the moon and the day of the week, and sometimes the planetary hour. I don't worry about what sign the moon's in. I really don't care. I don't care about transits other than what phase the moon's in. I don't care if Mercury's retrograde. I don't care if there's a pimple on Mars. I really don't care what's going on. As long as I've got the right moon phase, it's not a dark moon, it's not an eclipse, and it's the right day of the week, I'm good to go. And even then, if it's that important, none of it matters. I'll just do my spell. All right? So there is a lot for you to think about as you're working more spells like we did last week. You just keep going with those spells, but now start to consider what phase of the moon and what day of the week. And then you can also start considering using some colors perhaps on your altar, and maybe some flowers based on the fragrances, or using some of those perfumes. And it's okay if you use a perfume that just makes you feel like that planet. That's okay. If it's not an official perfume of the planet, if it makes you feel like that planet, that's fine. And let me tell you, there's a couple of all-purpose perfumes that I find work beautifully if you want to use perfumes and you don't know what to use. Verbena works with anything. Any Van, any verbena, Florida water, or any traditional eau de cologne works with anything if you want to add fragrance. You can burn frankincense for almost anything if you're burning incense. Frankincense and myrrh will work for almost anything. There are some universal scents as well. But we'll get more and more into all of this as we go along. Just start to play, enjoy, just adding another couple of dimensions to your spellcasting, and you're going to have a great week. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. We'll be back with Lesson 14 next week. Until then, blessed be.